Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us this morning. My name is Ahmed Badat. I'm the chair for the Commercial Global Business Network of the Northern Illinois Commercial Association of Realtors. Thank you for joining us this morning. And, I'd just like to thank Amy, who's our moderator today and our committee member, along with Amelia, also one of our committee members, for stepping up at short notice and putting this program together. So Amy's going to be moderating the event, and she'll tell you already the setup and what we're going to be doing. But I'm just going to give you a little introduction about Amy. Since 1997, Amy has enjoyed a fruitful career in commercial real estate, involved in both ground up development of master plan communities, enclosed regional shopping centers, and established retail shopping centers. As Caden Commercial COO, she oversees day-to-day operations, talent recruiting, development, strategic growth, and many other parts of the puzzle that she fills up at Caden. Extensive knowledge in ground-up and repositioning, development of retail assets, retail lease negotiations, commercial property management, staff, architecture, performance management. I mean, it goes on and on. And, her talents don't stop there. She's also involved in a lot of philanthropic work and organizations, serves as office and past president of Women's Philanthropic Educational Organization, PO Illinois chapter, fundraising committee for the O'Brien School for the Maasai, and served as a board of director for the Elgin Youth Symphony Orchestra. Amy, thank you very much. I'm proud to say that you are a fellow committee member and someone with a lot of talent, and it's all yours. Take it away.
Ahmed, thank you so much. It's great to be here this morning, and it is my pleasure to give you just a few housekeeping reminders before we start. Please do keep yourselves muted during the presentation. And then if you have questions during Amelia's presentation this morning, please feel free to drop them into the chat or the Q&A. We will monitor those. We will also have a question and answer session at the end before we move into our breakout rooms. So we will be able to address any questions that you may have. Also, when you go to your breakout rooms, as a reminder, please put your introductions and your personal information about your contact or anything that you would like to share in the chat, and you can save that at the end. It might save on some time as you're introducing one another. So without further ado, it is my distinct pleasure to introduce you to the 2021 Diversity MBA Top 100 over 50 Executive Leader in Corporate America, Amelia Linardakis, and she is with us. She's the managing partner for the Language Advisors Network Group, and she is also, as Ahmed shared, a committee member of the Global the Global Business Network Group, or NICAR. I completely blanked out. She's a business transformation leader. She's a professor of international business and global negotiations. She has guided companies such as McDonald's, Navistar, and R.R. Donnelley in managing their global workforce. And we are so incredibly grateful to have her here this morning to share her expertise in linguistics, cultural counseling, training, organizational development. All of these expertise will help give us some best practices in negotiation styles across cultures. So welcome to Amelia.
Thank you, Amy. I hope you guys can all hear me. We have such a diversified audience today. So we have people from India, Nigeria, Portugal, United States. So welcome. Thank you for making time this morning. I hope that you walk away with some very valuable lessons from negotiations. As you saw it in the intro, we negotiate every day, whether it's with our coworkers, our family members, our children, especially to take the garbage out or do dishes. We negotiate at some capacity. So without losing much time, I will go ahead and share my screen. And so the topic, negotiating across cultures. What I have, give me one moment here. Okay, the way I have organized the presentation is to cover two major areas. So the first area would be the general notion of negotiations, the terminology that we deal with everyday negotiations. And the second part will focus on culture and multicultural negotiations. So the agenda for today, if I can get the screen to move. Okay, the agenda is what is negotiations? We're going to look at some useful terminology in negotiations. We're going to talk about ethics and trust, how cross-cultural intelligence affects negotiations. We're going to look at aspects of gender and culture in negotiations. And then we're going to put some negotiation tips in Mexican, Indian, Chinese, and American cultures. So first, let's start with defining negotiations. We are social, by nature, we are social beings, so we need human interaction. And human interaction is very essential to everyday negotiations. However, intimidating, chiseling, tricking, and cheating are not part of negotiation. So if any of those, you are dealing with any of those traits, you know that you are dealing with probably the wrong negotiator. So some of the negotiation aspects are emotion-based and they're personal. So we talk about personality, but in terms of how personality affects negotiation, let's look at each column or each row. Emotions, temperament, and personality affect the needs, interests, goals, and perspective in a negotiation. Also, ego, self-concept, and fear affect our needs. Unfortunately, we cannot control our fears. We can lessen our fears, but we're still fearful about the outcomes or even the processes when we deal in negotiations. Attitude affects our needs and our negotiation. What kind of attitude do we have? The approach that we take. Are we positive? Are we negative towards that approach? And then knowledge of self-knowledge, and we're going to talk more about self-knowledge, is the starting point towards building effective negotiation skills. Moving forward, there is a misconception that everything is negotiable. I want you to erase that from your head. Not everything is negotiable. People have limits and people have values. So every person has their own limits to what he or she can give, is willing to give or take. So not everything should be negotiated. Potential for mutual benefit is a prerequisite to negotiations. So let's look at some of the components of negotiation. As we said, personality, we're born with it. We can adjust certain areas of personality, but personality, it's not very easy to change. Approach is another component, style, temperament, perception. We're going to talk a little bit about self-perception versus the way others perceive us to be. Interests, needs, values. Values include integrity, power. How powerful are we as human beings, or how much influence do we have in other people who are involved in the negotiation. Also, type of conflict that we're dealing with, the alternatives. We're going to talk a lot about alternatives because they're a key component when it comes to negotiations. And goals, what we want out of each negotiation. So these are all components that we deal at point in time in any negotiation. So the most important trait is knowing yourself. And the question is, how well do you know yourself? Negotiation is interaction. So one lesson that you can take is you have to separate people from the problem, okay? And that is kind of difficult to do. We take things personally, we take it on a personal level. So it's tough to separate people from the interaction. When we separate the people from the problem, that's when we're dealing on the issue of negotiation, and we're kind of diminishing that emotional, the emotional feelings that are associated with the negotiation. We must become aware of our behavior, preferences, and mannerism. What that means is we have to look into ourselves and see what kind of patterns do we follow. Where do failures in negotiations come from? They come from patterns, and then that's how we adjust those patterns, and that's how we adjust our behavior, our preferences, our verbal communication. Also, another area that I would like to add here is how flexible we are. Are we flexible with our own behavior, or are we fixed in getting things done a certain way? And then we must overcome, or we must become aware of how we are perceived. This is very important. There is a difference between how we perceive ourselves versus how others view us. So I would give you a little exercise here. You know, if I had probably another 2 hours, I would put you in a group. But think about if you ask one of your coworkers or somebody who knows you well, and if you ask them to be honest with you, how do they perceive you to be? Okay, and they'll give you maybe, you know, 5, 6 traits, and compare those to the way you view yourself, because it's very important that we can trust somebody with that kind of information as to how the outside world perceives us to be. So this is just a little definition of personality. Personality is the dynamic developing system of an individual's distinctive emotional, cognitive, and spiritual attributes. And there is a great book out there called The Heart and the Mind of Negotiators. So it kind of talks about the cognitive and the spiritual and reasoning behind each negotiation that's part of our personality. So the first term I would like to introduce is BATNA. Not too many people know BATNA, but it's one of the main terms in negotiation. It stands for Best Alternative to a Negotiated Agreement. What that means is, what are you going to do if you reach an agreement, if you do not reach an agreement with the person you're dealing with? What are the options that you have? So what you have to do is you have to create alternatives. That means create new options. How can you reapproach something that is not negotiable at that point? Also, BATNA defines the most that you're willing to pay and the list that you're willing to accept in terms, you know, of value. Also, is a key source of power. It gives you an idea as to when should you walk away. And we're gonna do some exercise with that as well. Why is BATNA important? So first of all, it provides an alternative if negotiations fails through. Okay, so you don't just walk away, you can go back and renegotiate something that did not work. It provides negotiating power, and also it determines your reservation point. And we're gonna talk about reservation point, which is the worst price that you're willing to accept. So here are the 4 steps to identifying and developing the best alternative to a negotiated agreement. So how do you calculate your BATNA? First of all, you need to list all your alternatives in the current negotiation. So what could you do if the negotiations falls through? So you make a list of 4 or 5 alternatives. Secondly, you want to evaluate the value of each alternative. What I usually do is I give worth points. So if something is very important to me, I give it a 5-point worth. If something is not very important, I give it 1 point worthness. So once you place that worth value in each alternative, you'll be able to move to the next step, which is select the alternative that will provide the highest value to you. Okay, so there is a little addition math involved in that process, but it gives you an idea as to where you should focus your attention and what alternative it's more valuable to you. So select the alternative that would provide the highest value to you, and this is the best alternative to a negotiated agreement. Then the final step is you want to calculate, after determining your BATNA, you want to calculate the lowest value deal that you're willing to accept, and that is your reservation point. So what you're doing here, you're evaluating the lowest value deal to the highest value deal, and where in that range do you fall. So here are some other negotiation terms that we're going to be using. Target, you all know what a target is. It's your ideal settlement price. So in an ideal world, what would you like to achieve? The reservation point is the monetary walkaway point, is the quantification of your BATNA, and how much are you willing to spend if you're the buyer, and how much are you willing to accept if you are the seller. Then there is a new term called the ZOPA, is the zone of potential agreement. And this is where most negotiation will happen. So ZOPA is the range between the buyer's reservation price and the seller's reservation price. So to illustrate that, I'll give you an example. Let's say I am selling my car, and my ideal or target price would be $10,000. I want to sell it for $10,000. And my reservation point is, or reservation price is $6,000. I do not want to go lower $6,000.
So Amelia, should you should you reveal your reservation point? Should you ever disclose what that
Okay, that's a very good question. You do not want to reveal your reservation point unless you have a short or a small zone of potential agreement. That was the only. You cannot do it in good faith. Okay, if you reveal your reservation point, you are revealing your strategy, and negotiation is an issue of strategy. So, let me turn the lights on, because if I don't move, there we go. I have sensors in the room. If I'm for too long in the same position, they'll go off. So the reason why you don't want to reveal the reservation point is because the bargaining zone can be wide enough for you to negotiate in that bargaining zone, and you do not want to leave money on the table. So you got to make sure that if you do, that bargaining zone is very narrow. That's the only time I would suggest that you reveal your reservation point. So yeah, going back to this chart, if your reservation point as a seller is $6,000 and your target is 10,000, then let's say Amy is interested in buying her car, and her ideal point or target point is $5,000, but she doesn't want to spend more than $7,500. So between my $6,000 and $7,500, this is the zone of potential agreement where the negotiation is most likely to happen, or what we call ZOPA. So
before you move on, Amelia, is there ever, because you talked about in good faith, is there ever a time that you would, as part of quote unquote negotiations, lie about that reservation point?
Yeah, so lying will reduce the size of your ZOPA. And then secondly, lying will affect your reputation. So as a negotiator. So if you're willing to sell let's say your reputation for $1,500, then go ahead and do it, but there is no price put behind your reputation. So lying, it's never a good strategy. And once you get a reputation of being that type of negotiator, and especially we have a lot of real estate or people from the real estate industry in here, the world is very small. So that's all I can say. You'll always deal with somebody within the industry that, you don't want to be classified as, a bad negotiator.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yep, sure. So there are two books that I would like to suggest, and I'm not trying to promote them. They're on Amazon, or you can actually, here's a non-promotion comment, you can download them for free on the internet. So the first one is Fisher and Uri's Getting to Yes. And the second one is written, Never Split the Difference, is written by Chris Voss, who is a hostage negotiator, and he works with FBI and other government agencies. So I put together some lessons or some takeaways from each book, just as starting points. I suggest you read them, they're great. So here are some lessons from Getting to Yes. Again, you want to separate the people from the problem. People are not the problem is the problem. You want to focus on your interests. You want to focus on the interest rather than the position. You should never hold the position, okay? And the interest has to be a mutual interest, and we're going to talk about win-win strategy. You want to generate a variety of options before settling on an agreement. The more options you put on the table, the more you expand the pie. So you hear that a lot in negotiation. The pie is expandable. So that means that it doesn't have just 4 slices. It does not have just 8 slices. So if you focus on a win-win agreement, you tend to expand the pie for both parties. And then also you want to insist that the agreements are based on objective criteria. So always base everything on facts. And Never Split the Difference. There are a different set of lessons or takeaways from that book. First, you have negotiate your emotions rather than just reason. Now, this is a tough one. Doesn't mean negotiate emotionally. Okay, we all know that we shouldn't be emotional when we negotiate, or let our emotions show. What negotiating through emotions means, as emotion beings, we should focus on the other side's emotions. We are all at the table. We're all dealing with getting upset or getting frustrated, or working on time constraints. So understanding and realizing that the other side is emotionally involved, will help you get through the process a lot quicker and effective. Summarize their position back to them to demonstrate empathy. When people hear what they just said, it reinforces that you have been listening to their point. So make sure that you do summarize, and you can start by saying, let me repeat what I just heard from you, or let me repeat. You just want to make sure that you can mirror or repeat whatever they're saying. And then you want to gain leverage by watching out for unexpected valuable information. You'd be surprised how much information is given in small words throughout a negotiation process. And sometimes we do not pay attention to them. So make sure you have a pen and pencil when you're listening to the other side, because they might throw a word in there that can change the story. So, and then the last one, which I love, talk with a slow, calm, clear voice, like a late night radio show host. You want to make sure, especially when we deal with people from other cultures, we want to make sure that we are understood, not just in terms of terminology, but also context, and making sure that the other side does not have any gray areas. It's a shame to lose a negotiation just because we are rushing into processes, or even with our own words. So what is the most valuable negotiation technique? So win-win is by far the best negotiation technique. So the best way to get what you want is to help the other side get what they want. And when you try, if you do the I win, you lose, that becomes a we lose. That means that people would now want to do business with us. Successful creation of win-win deals involve building trust, and we're going to talk about trust, providing and sharing information about priorities and preferences, asking diagnostic questions, always open-ended questions as to, why or how, that those are always good diagnostic questions. Making package offers. So a lot of times we focus on single issue offers. Give me this for that. A lot of times you can approach it as a package offer, saying, hey, if I give you A and B, are you willing to give me C? Or if I give you A, are you willing to give me B and C? So don't forget, you can always, bundle the offers. And then structuring contingency contracts that conceptualize or capitalize on differences in negotiators' beliefs, expectations, and attitudes. And let's talk a little bit about ethics and trust, which are important in every culture, I would say. One of my favorite books is The Speed of Trust by Stephen Covey, and he says the one thing that changes everything. Here's the quote. It says, there is one thing that is common to every individual, relationship, team, family, organization, nation, economy, and civilization throughout the world. One thing which, if removed, will destroy the most powerful government, the most successful business, the most thriving economy, the most influential leadership, the greatest friendship, the strongest character, the deepest love. And he is talking about trust. So what is trust? Trust means confidence, and the opposite of trust is not mistrust, but this is suspicion. So in 10 seconds in your mind, I want you to think of someone you trust, and think about, why do you trust that person? How is that your relationship with that person? How is the communication? What kind of emotions do you get when you talk to that person? Do you like to work with that person? And then the second part is, I want you to think of somebody you don't trust. And a lot of times we have people we don't trust, and we don't know why we don't trust them. They haven't give us a reason. So think about that. How is the communication with somebody you don't trust? What kind of emotions do you get from somebody you don't trust? So think about that particular person. Okay. So again, not trusting someone means you're suspicious about them. There is less confidence dealing with that person. So throughout newspapers, these are some headlines from newspapers, and we see it in our global society nowadays that we're going through a crisis of trust. But some of the headlines say employees' new motto, trust no one, or companies urged to rebuild trust, or both sides betray the other's trust. Another one says 20 New York Stock Exchange traders indicted. Ethics must be strengthened to rebuild people's trust. Relationships fall apart as trust dwindles, and now who do you trust? So these are all newspaper headlines. And going back to Stephen Covey and The Speed of Trust, he talks about the economics of trust. And I guess it's kind of funny, he has trademarked the trust tax and the trust dividend, but he says high trust organizations outperformed low trust organizations by 286% on total dividend returns to shareholders. So the lower the trust, the lower the speed of business and the higher the cost. Whereas the trust dividends, the higher the trust, the higher the speed, the lower the cost. So I just want to leave that for a few seconds for you to take a look at before I move to the next slide. Okay, great. So here's an example of the previous slide on how low trust and low speed increased cost. Immediately following 9/11, our trust in flying in US went down dramatically. Took longer and cost more to travel. You needed to arrive 2 hours earlier at the airport. You pay a security tax with every ticket that you buy, and in high risk areas, you go through several screening bags, or your bags are unpacked, and you're searched multiple times by multiple people. So because trust was low, speed went down, and the cost went up. So this is just, an example of supporting Covey's cost of trust. So let's take a look at the behaviors of highly trusted leaders. I have an entire course on the highly trusted leaders, so I will not take too much time to go over this, but highly trusted leaders, they talk straight. So they mean what they say and they say what they mean. They demonstrate respect. So they give respect and they receive the same amount of respect. They create transparency. They go by the motto, what you see is what you get. They right wrongs. So if they do something wrong, not do they just fix it, but they admit it that they were wrong. They show loyalty. They deliver trust. They confront reality. They clarify expectations. They practice accountability, and they keep commitments. Now, I can go and probably spend another half hour on going over each one of them, but I think this should be a good start to, just to recognize the highly trusted leaders in our organizations and our environments.
So Amelia, when you talk about highly trusted leaders or just highly trusted individuals, one of the worst feelings is to feel like you've been taken by someone that you trust. How do you tell when someone's lying to you? If it's not just blatantly obvious, how do you tell if someone is lying to you, that there's a breach of trust that's happening?
Yep. So first of all, you want to test for consistency. So if I would suggest you ask the same question multiple times. It can be twice or 3 times throughout the conversation. So and then you look for that consistency in the answer. Also, you want to ask for proof of evidence for them to validate their point. So always, it's kind of hard to say, well, show me the data, but don't be afraid to ask for validation when you're dealing with people that you have a hard time trusting for whatever reason. So those are, I would say, those are the 2 main components. Consistency and validation supported by facts would be, 2 ways of checking to see if somebody is lying to you or not.
Great, thank you.
Yep, thank you, Amy. So the next topic we're going to talk about is empathy. And, I just put a definition of empathy: the action of understanding, being aware of, and being sensitive to, and vicariously expecting the feelings, thoughts, and experience of another of either the past or present without having the feelings, thoughts, and experience fully communicated in an objective, explicit manner. And we're going to talk about empathy. The golden rule goes through many cultures and religions, and as in Buddhism, we have hurt not others in ways that you yourself would find harmful. In Islam, they say no one of you is a believer until he desires for his brother that which he desires for himself. In Christianity, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And in Judaism, what is hateful to you, do not to your fellow man. That is the entire law. All the rest is commentary. So we see a golden or global rule when it comes to empathy. So some of the characteristics of a good negotiator: they think fast and clear, they focus on objectives, they have good humor. Be careful with humor. You know, you want to make sure that you are not offending anyone with your humor. They're easily and good expressed. They know how to control themselves. They're patient. They have the capacity analysis and synthesis. They exercise great empathy, and they're impersonal. So just a short definition of sympathy versus empathy. What is the difference between sympathy and empathy? So I put a situation there: a friend losing all the hair after having a chemotherapy. Sympathy would be like you feel sorry for the hardship of other people, and you can actually buy a scarf or a wig or a hat that you put on your head, as it is trendy these days anyways. Whereas empathy is being in the shoes of others. So you put yourself in other people's shoes. And it comes actually with words. You can approach your friend saying, I understand that it's not easy for you. I don't mind to bring you to get a scarf or a wig or a hat that we can wear together so that you won't feel alone. So you are using truly verbiage to express your empathy. And I thought this was cute. That's a kitten feeling sorry for a kitten saying, dude, that sucks. You know, so having that glass, I'm not sure if it will fall under sympathy or empathy, but I thought it was just a you know, cute empathy meme. So now we're shifting gears a little bit, and we are going to talk about cross-cultural intelligence and negotiation. And knowing that we have quite a few people from all over the world, I want to make sure that I give everybody enough time to answer any questions we might have when it comes to global negotiations. So let's first define culture. Culture comes from Latin, cultus. It means to care. We say it in certain words like agriculture or cultivate, mean to take care of. So I want you to remember the third bullet point. People care for things differently from what we do. So that means what is important to me and what I care for does not mean it's important to you or what you care for. And cultural intelligence is the capability to relate and work effectively across cultures. So cultural intelligence is developed through cognitive means. So that means the head and the mind, how we think, how we conceptualize. So learning about your own and other cultures and your own cultural diversity. Also, CQ is developed through physical means, the body language. So using all your senses, all your nonverbal communication. You know, they say anywhere between 70 to 93% of our communication is through body language and nonverbal communication. So physical means is extremely important when we deal with other cultures and how we develop that cultural intelligence. The last one is motivational means. So that is your emotions, gain rewards and strengths from acceptance and success. So what motivates us as human beings. So a lot of you have heard about Gert Hofstede's cultural dimensions. So it's a theory that looks at unique aspects of culture and rates them on a scale for comparison, how people from different countries and cultures behave and interact based on the categories of different dimensions. And there are 6 categories that we're going to go over quickly. So back in 1973, Hofstede, he conducted a survey for IBM, which is a multinational company, about the morale in the workplace. And he examined responses from 40 different countries and classified them in 6 main cultural dimensions that we still use today as a model in cross-cultural communication. So the first one is power distance, and this is the degree to equality or inequality or hierarchy that we see within a society and how comfortable we are with that distance. So the extent to which the less powerful members of organizations and institutions, family can be an institution, accept and expect that power is distributed inequally. The fundamental issue here is how society handles inequalities among people, and people in societies exhibiting a large degree of power distance accept a hierarchy order in which everybody has a place and which needs to no further justification. So they pretty much accept the hierarchy. In societies with low power distance, people strive to equalize the distribution of power and demand justification for inequalities of power. So if we compare, so the Western world, that's the United States, Northern Europe, Western Europe, and certain countries being low context cultures, we would not be okay with a high inequality, whereas countries like Asian countries or even some Latin American countries, they are more comfortable with that hierarchy in the institutions or within the society. So part distance is one of the main or the first of the Hofstede's dimensions of culture. The second one is individualism versus collectivism. So in the individualist societies, individuals are expected to take care of only themselves and their immediate families. Again, Western cultures, low context societies are highly individualistic. The opposite, collectivism, the individuals are expected to take care of their relatives and other members of their particular in-group and look after them in exchange for unquestioning loyalty. Okay, so society position. And again, here we're dealing with the I versus we. So Western cultures are very individualistic. You know, we speak in I, we take pride in our own accomplishments, whereas in collectivistic societies, they talk on behalf of the group, they talk with we. So that team, you know, especially if you have multicultural teams in the workplace, you see that Asians, for example, report more in we terms than we report. The next one is masculinity versus femininity, not to be confused with gender. Okay, so masculinity is in reference to a society for achievement, heroism, assertiveness, and material rewards for success. Whereas femininity stands for preference for cooperation, modesty, caring for the weak, and quality of life. A society at large is more, okay, so a competitive society will be more on the masculinity side, whereas a consensus-oriented society will fall under the femininity side. And then again, the business world, we deal with tough versus tender kind of attributes. And again, not to be, even though they have the gender adjectives in there, I would not consider them gender related. It's just that females tend to be more caring, more cooperative, more modest when they do business, especially negotiations. The third one or the fourth one, I don't know what number we are, is uncertainty avoidance. So this is how a society deals with the fact that the future can never be known. And we hear it a lot in some cultures, including my own. I'm Albanian, so growing up, I never heard my grandma talking about the future, or if she did, she always said God willing, right? Because the future is unknown and it's only the hands of God. So we see that in a lot of cultures, in high context cultures, that's very pronounced. In low context cultures, you have to plan the future, right? So uncertainty avoidance, if you have a society that has a high uncertainty avoidance, that means that they're not sure about ambiguity or the unknown. How do you deal with that? So countries exhibiting strong uncertainty avoidance index maintains rigid codes of belief and behavior and are intolerant of unorthodox behavior and ideas, and the weak UAI societies maintain a more relaxed attitude in which practice counts more than principles. So long-term versus short-term orientation. So every society has to maintain some links with its own past while dealing with the changes of the present and the future. Societies prioritize those existential goals differently. So societies who score low on this dimension, they prefer to maintain a time-honored tradition and norms while viewing society changes with suspicion. And the ones that score high, they take more pragmatic approach and encourage thrift and the efforts in modern education as a way to prepare for the future. So again, we in the business world, we refer to this as a normative versus the pragmatic dimension. So again, just to wrap it up, honoring tradition and long-term rewards or immediate results in saving face. And I think this is the sixth one, is indulgence versus restraint. Indulgence stands for a society that allows relatively free gratification of basic and natural human drives related to enjoying life and having fun, whereas the restraint dimension stands for a society that suppresses gratification of needs and regulates it by means of strict and social norms. As you notice, I have a YouTube video, short video on each one of the dimensions. So I'm not sure, I can copy and put them while you meet for the breakout sessions. I can probably put them on the chat so you can see each one of Hofstede's dimensions, short video on each one of them. So to put it in perspective how low context cultures and high context cultures work, we have Germany, Scandinavian countries, the United States, United Kingdom, and France fall onto the low context cultures, whereas China, West Africa, Arabian Peninsula, Greece, Mexico, and Spain, and Italy, they fall more into the high context cultures. And all in one chart, we have the low context examples of the countries, US, UK, Canada, Germany, and Norway. And then we have on the high context, France, Italy, Spain, Asian countries, and so on. So business outlook, low context countries are competitive, high context countries are cooperative. Work ethics, we're very task oriented, whereas high context are very relationship oriented. Work style, we're very individualistic. Other countries are team oriented. The employee desires, we focus on individual achievements, and high context cultures focus on team achievements. Relationships, we have many, they're looser and short term. In high context cultures, there are fewer, they're tighter, they're long term. The decision process, we're logical, linear, and rule oriented. And in high context cultures, they're very intuitive and relational. Communication, we have verbal over nonverbal, whereas in high context cultures, nonverbal takes over the verbal. Planning horizons, we are more explicit. We like written forms and we're very formal. And in high context cultures, they're more implicit, they're oral, they're informal, they believe on a handshake. Sense of time, time is huge. We can have an entire presentation on the notion of time because in our culture, time means money, whereas in other cultures, it's very fluid. So we're very present and future oriented. And in high context cultures, they have a deep respect for the past. View of change, we love change. So we have change over tradition. And in high context cultures, tradition takes over change. Knowledge, explicit and conscious. And in high context cultures is implicit, not fully conscious. And learning, knowledge is transferable. In high context cultures, knowledge is situational. Sorry, I rushed this, but you can just read it on your own. It's pretty much a lot of cultures cross into each other. So let's say, for example, in Italy, if yes, the sense of time, they're very deep respect for the past, so they're very fluid in their time. However, they have explicit and conscious knowledge. They believe in education, they believe in the future, and they look at knowledge as something that can drive forces into the future and being more innovative and so on. So a lot of cultures do crisscross each other, so this is a lot black and white in terms of low context versus high context cultures, and that overlap comes more from doing business in those countries, and those are real true life situations. Going back to the low context, and this is for in terms of communication. In low context cultures, we have explicit communication, clear rules, and direct communication. And in high context cultures is implicit, there is a lot of silence, internalized rules, and indirect communication. So moving a little bit now into, I got to keep track of my time here, into the aspects of gender and negotiation. And we're looking at the male model and female model. So traditional male model of negotiating, males are more competitive, hierarchical, they like to win, they're rational, they're unemotional, and they're consistent with distributive bargaining. So we don't have much time to talk about the difference about distributive versus integrative bargaining, but integrative bargaining, that's when you create the options, that's when you get that win-win negotiation. Now, the female model in negotiating, they're more cooperative, they're egalitarian, they focus on quality results, they're very intuitive, they're empathetic, and consistent with integrative bargaining. So common characteristics of culture include self-identity. so how dependent or interdependent we are. Relationships, again, who makes the decision, especially if you are, in real estate, relationships are very important, and again, who makes the decision? If you are dealing with a family from India, even though the son is the one who's buying the house, the old man of the family is the final decision maker. Communication, verbal and nonverbal. So I would suggest we're all careful with our nonverbal and body language, because that speaks a lot more than the verbal. Time consciousness, is it a cyclical or linear type of time? Again, in every culture, time does not always mean money. So be careful with how you view time. You build relationships and create value with people when you respect their time. So that means you give them time. Okay, you don't rush into things. And mental process is the abstract thinking or rote memory. So these are some tactics for success and consensus building. Be patient. So just like in real estate, we have location, location, location. Be patient should be repeated 3 times when we deal, with people from other cultures. Share significant amounts of information. However, be careful how much you share and when you share it when you're negotiating. You do not want to show all your cards right up front. So you got to do some preparation time before you show up for a negotiation. Focus information on the doubters. Again, going back to trust, you're building trust with the other side. So if you have a doubter, that's when you focus on information. That's when you come with objective criteria that show, hey, this is supported by facts. Use informal negotiation. A lot of times, some of my clients, they come back from, let's say, a trip to Europe, and they sit down and we say, okay, so what worked? And they said, well, the conference room did not work very well. So a lot of negotiation does not happen in a conference room. A lot of it happens outside. A lot of it happens, in a bathhouse in Turkey, or you'd be surprised, or around the dining room table at a family, when they introduce you to the counterpart. So informal negotiations a lot of times are more successful than the formal ones around the conference room table. Adjust your timetable to satisfy all of the interests involved. Again, be aware of time, and you got to know who you're dealing with. Relationship building can result in better deals. See the world from the other side's perspective. So you need to exercise some level of empathy with the other side. Tailor arguments to culture of listener, and express ideas clearly, speak slow, and confirm understanding. Okay, so now I have a few examples. I have negotiating with Mexicans, Indians, and Americans, and I have a third culture. So negotiating with Mexicans, the business atmosphere is friendly, gracious, and unhurried. The pace will tend to be slower than that of US and Northern Europe. Decisions are made at top level with consultation at low levels. So this may take time. Again, the word time pops out again. Be calm and patient with delays and build them into your expectations. Personal friendships are vital to business in Mexico. Mexicans look for long-term relationships based on mutual trust and reliability. Be warm and personal, yet retain your dignity, courtesy, and diplomacy. Use high-end, sharp visuals in your presentations. And one major barrier in negotiations is the issue of financing the cost of foreign goods and services. So be prepared with some creative financial solutions when you deal in Mexico. The next one is negotiating with Chinese. Be prepared for the Chinese to supply an interpreter. If possible, bring your own interpreter as well to help you understand the nuances of the discussions. Avoid slang, especially figures of speech from sports. Try to use short and simple sentences. Pause often and make sure that the exact words are understood. Unless you understand the significance of colors, try to use black and white for all your presentations and all your collateral material. In terms of foreign executives, especially those from the US, they have a reputation for impatience, and the Chinese will drag out the negotiations well beyond your deadline just to gain an advantage. Again, time. Chinese will try to renegotiate everything on the final day of your visit. I'm sure for those of you in real estate are familiar with that. And they may continue to try for a better deal even after the contract has been signed. Okay. Remember, weights and measures are mainly in the metric system. Be patient. Chinese are cautious in business matters and expect a strong relationship to be built before they close a deal. And at the end of the meeting, leave before the Chinese do. And we're moving with negotiating with the Indians. India is a moderate collectivistic culture in which an individual's decision must be in harmony with a family, group, and social structure. Friendship and kinship are more important than expertise. One must build a relationship with the other participants in the negotiation process by discussing friends and family. Indians may often be too polite to say no. I gotta say something in there. Also, just because they nod, it doesn't mean they're agreeing with what you're saying. They nod for understanding. So that means that I understand what you're saying. So be careful with the nonverbal communication. Personal feelings from the base of the truth, but a strong faith in religious ideologies is always present. The use of objective facts is less persuasive than a combination of feelings and faith. Indians also have a less hurried attitude towards time than North Americans, and the concept time is money is alien to many Indians. While you should get sound legal and tax advice before negotiating any agreement, it is important to be flexible and not appear too legalistic during the negotiation. And then the final one is negotiating with Americans. Punctuality is highly emphasized in high industrialized cities, such as Chicago, LA, New York. There is extreme traffic, so which can cause delays, so make sure you are on time and you're giving yourself enough time. Send all relevant information electronically to prospects prior to your visit, and be prepared to process payments through paperless online systems. So, we don't use much paper and pen anymore. The bottom line, which is a financial issue, new technology, short-term rewards are normal focus in negotiations. Remember that the U.S. is mostly, we're a very lawyer-based type of society and environment. So there are lawyers who specialize in every industry and segment of society, from corporate tax attorney to what we call the ambulance chaser, the personal injury lawyers. Until you know a person, avoid discussing religion, money, politics, or other controversial issues such as race, gender discrimination, etc. And the final, some common topics of conversation that we suggest are travel, job, food, exercise, sports, music, movies, books, etc., which are kind of universal topics. And just this 15-step plan, and I think I'm almost on the dot, but these are, it's just a summary of what we talked, and I put in the 15, actually it's 14, I don't know where the 15th went, but practice critical thinking and empathy, study psychology, sociology, and communication and conflict. Again, know yourself, know negotiation styles and temperaments, communicate effectively, acknowledge cultural and contextual differences and expectations, understand the dynamics of power, identify interests and goals before you negotiate, be assertive, be persuasive, be prepared, and avoid common mistakes. Use tactics that work for you and understand others' tactics. Know when to walk away and know how to evaluate your performance and improve on that performance. And I'm opening the floor to any questions.
Amelia, thank you so very much. That was absolutely fantastic. Would you be able to go ahead?
I felt like I was running on steroids, but
well, it was wonderful. It was very concise and very complete. Could you please go ahead and stop sharing so that way we can bring people's screens and be able to see who might be asking questions. We did have a question during your presentation. Dimitri asked, is America a masculine society?
Totally. America is a masculine society. We're highly competitive. Just turn the TV on and watch the shows that we have every night. We have Iron Chef America, where one chef is at the end, as the Iron Chef. Look at The Bachelorette or The Bachelor. I don't know if it's still running or not, but you have, 20 girls fighting for one guy. So we are a highly competitive society. So yes, we are a masculine society.
What other questions do we have from the group? Feel free to drop it in the chat or unmute yourself and ask questions personally.
I think a few people, including myself, were wondering if sharing the slides outside this presentation is a possibility.
Sure, I'll put on a PDF format.
And as a reminder, this is being recorded, so you will be able to access the workshop again after the fact through the NICAR website.
Amelia, can you give us some hints on how to really zoom in on where the different cultures are coming from? Because I'm expecting that there is variety in each culture. However, you know, how do we become sensitive to where that variety exists?
Well, first of all, we do learn from our own mistakes, and I'm sure, you know, we have heard a few times before we have learned about that culture. But in terms of avoiding certain pitfalls, I would suggest a great book out there. It's I think Ahmed is familiar with it. It's called Shake, Bow, and Kiss Hand. Shake, bow, and kiss, bow, and shake hands. Sorry, not kiss hands. Kiss, Bow, and Shake Hands. It's a great book, and it's not a book that you read cover to cover. It's more of a reference book, I would say, and it has, every country has business practices, business etiquette, and also some negotiation tips on how to negotiate with other countries. So it's kind of difficult to say, you know, I don't like laundry lists of do's and don'ts in certain cultures, even though they help with making mistakes. But once you identify certain cultures, whether they are high context or low context, that'll be a good guideline for you when you deal with that culture or with people from that culture. At least you have a broad idea. Then you can probably funnel it down to more, you know, specific topic related or industry related, whether you're in real estate or if you're doing corporate deals with foreign countries. That's when it comes into more. You know, I would suggest that you get that book, because even when I meet with clients from, you know, all over the world, that's the one thing I do is like, well, let me learn about how they do business in Germany, because I have clients say, yeah, we don't need the, you know, we don't need the cultural training in Germany because it's very similar to the American culture, and that's not the case. So we approach projects differently, we approach ambiguity differently, we approach challenges differently. So that's why I suggest that book, because it's a quick read for that specific country. You only have like 10 pages per country or so.
It's a great book. Thank you